distracted by the finer things in life. He looks shattered and he's broke, and all you have to do is find that guy who's perfect for you. And the fine line between wrong and right.
From the outside looking in, other people's lives can look perfect. In 2019, the murder of a teenager tore a community apart.
And I just ran out of work, jumped in the car. I thought in my head, she's cut herself. I thought she must have cut herself and there's blood. All I could think was, but why is she home?
I was really struggling to believe that he did it, and that if he did do it, he didn't mean to do it, it was an accident.
Life is fragile, and it only takes one person and a betrayal of trust to shatter everyone's world. It's like they say, you never know what goes on behind closed doors. Ellie Gould and her family lived in the Wiltshire town of Cairn, nestled in the North Wessex Downs, an area of outstanding natural beauty.
We've lived here over 20 years. It's a very small community, very close community. When you have children and they go through the school system and take part in activities such as swimming lessons or football clubs or brownies, scouts, that sort of thing, you get to know a lot of people.
It seemed like the ideal place to bring up children, and the Goulds were lucky enough to have family nearby.
We're close, we see a lot of each other. She's very close to her cousins. They're all of a similar age, so they've all gone through the same milestones together. And when we see them now, there's one man down, she's missing.
Ellie was born on the 6th of February 2002, and I was born 4 weeks later on the 6th of March. So being that exact month apart, inevitably we were very close because we were so close in age, and also kind of the two only girls, like within the cousins. And we also just got on really well.
They were like sisters. It was almost like we had twins in the family. And from day one, they were as thick as thieves. Even before they could start crawling, you'd put them in their car seats together and they'd sit there and they'd be talking in baby language, totally gabbling away in baby language with each other.
As she grew up, Ellie had a passion for horse riding.
She liked me driving her up to the stables and watching her jump and put the jumps up for her and move them around.
There we go, see? Oh, God, look how confident she is.
We were very close, and I'm so glad we spent those years together. We both had a love for horses, so that was our life. That's what we did at the weekends. And as a result of that, we had a lovely relationship.
When Ellie started in the sixth form at Harden Newish School in Chippenham, she quickly made a new set of friends.
We had all come from different groups, and it was just the first day of school, and I remember just saying, oh, let's go and sit with Ellie and Tilda. And so we went and we sat with them, and we've just been sat together ever since and became really close friends quite quickly.
As our school year progressed, we did begin making friends with more people, so more boys joined our group. We'd spend every minute that we could together, and we just really bonded over the silliest things.
They were a lovely group of girls and boys, and we got to know them, and, you know, I used to have a chat with them and hear about all the shenanigans that went on at school. It was good to be part of their lives, really.
It's a normal part of a developmental stage for teenagers to turn to their peers and identify more powerfully with them and form very strong bonds with their friendship group because, you know, that's how they compare, contrast, fit in, feel approved of, all of that kind of stuff. So the power of friendship at this age is very important.
Ellie was so funny, so bubbly and so smiley. The one thing that stands out to me for her, which I really, really got on with her well with, was that she was so real with everyone. She didn't change in front of people. She was always just Ellie, which was just amazing to me.
Ellie was a normal, happy, carefree teenager living life to the full. In January 2019, she had some news that, as a mum, you know is inevitable, but it's also something you worry about.
She told me one day after school that a boy had asked her out, and she seemed flattered. You know, she was quite bubbly. I said, this boy's asked me out, Mum. And I said, oh, that's nice. What's he called? And obviously asked a few questions about him. And I felt reassured that he was known to them. He was from Derry Hill. He knew the sons of good friends of ours. So I just thought, that's probably a good choice.
The boy in question, Tom Griffiths, was a bright, talented sportsman and had been at school with Ellie and her friends for years.
She'd fancied him for quite a while, actually, before we joined sixth form. Him and her had a weird sort of on and off thing in lower school, sort of around year 10 and year 11. And then when we finally joined sixth form, it turned into a relationship. It was only Tom and Ellie that they were the only romantic relationship in our group.
Some of the boys played for Chippenham Rugby Club, and he was in that team. So that's how the connection was made. And he seemed a quiet lad, nothing remarkable about him. We're a bit surprised, but as Matt and I said, it's the first boyfriend, it'll fizzle out.
It seemed her mum was right. It wasn't long before priorities shifted for Ellie, and boyfriend Tom became a less important part of her life.
So as Mox approached, I think she sort of realised she didn't need or want a boyfriend. She decided that actually friends and education was more important to her than having that one single person in her life. So she sort of decided to focus more on revision and, you know, mingling with the girls a bit more.
The thing is about teenage love, it could be your first important relationship. Your self-worth, your identity, how you see yourself are all tied up in somebody fancying you or wanting to go out with you. Now imagine the opposite when they say, I don't want this anymore. All that stuff can feel like the rug has literally been pulled from under your feet.
Her friends have told me that she finished with him on that Thursday night, and she posted something to them that how relieved she was that she felt freedom again.
Ellie had called a halt to her relationship with Tom. The next day, the 3rd of May 2019, would be her last.
On the Friday morning, it was just a normal morning. She was eating cereal. I was about to go to work. She'd normally have gone into school on the Friday morning, but she didn't have any lessons. So she decided to stay at home and revise. And her friend Ellie Welling was coming at about 12 o'clock to collect her, to drive her into school, because they both had history together. So that was the plan.
There are many things you fear as a parent, but the news Ellie's mum Carol received from husband Matt on that Friday afternoon was her worst nightmare.
He rang me at work, absolutely hysterical, and just said, Carol, you need to come home, Ellie's had an accident, she's had an accident, just drive carefully, Ellie's had an accident. Oh, and I was so taken back because I've never heard him be so hysterical.
On the 3rd of May 2019, Matthew, father of 17-year-old Ellie Gould, had called 999 after returning home.
999, which service do you require?
He also rang his wife Carol, saying there had been an accident in the house.
And I just ran out of work, jumped in the car. I thought in my head, she's cut herself. I know Matt didn't like blood. I thought she must have cut herself and there's blood. But all I could think was, but why is she home? Why is she home? She shouldn't be home till about 4 o'clock. Why is she home? And all sorts of thoughts were racing through my head as I drove home. As I was coming through a car, and a police car with sirens was trying to get past, and everyone was pulling over.
Carol had no idea what her husband had discovered. Detective Superintendent Jim Taylor was the senior investigating officer on the case.
Matthew returned home at around about 3 o'clock and walked into the kitchen to find Ellie. Of course, his initial impression and thoughts were that she must have been injured or she must have been involved in some sort of accident, and immediately sought help from a neighbour. And they called the ambulance, and of course, ambulance will automatically call the police. Officers arrived and uniformed colleagues arrived, and they were the ones who initially attempted first aid. They were faced with a horrific scene. Eleanor was found face down, and there was a large amount of blood. But noticeably at the time, she was lying face down with her right arm across her body, holding on to the handle of the knife, in such a way to make it look as though Ellie had inflicted the wounds herself.
And as I pulled around the corner here, there were just police cars everywhere, just abandoned. And I had nowhere to park, so I abandoned mine as well and just ran up to the end of our drive. And Matt was just there sobbing. And I just said, Matt, what's happened? What's happened? And that's when he said, Ellie's died. Ellie's died. And you can't believe the words that are being said. How could what? She's died? How? And there was an ambulance in the drive. And I can remember thinking, no, the paramedics are here. They can do something. They can do something. And I all just stood there stunned.
We know that she was probably there for about 4 hours. The nature of the injuries was such that even a skilled surgeon would struggle to have saved her life. So normal first aid, with officers at the scene, I don't think would have been able to save her life, sadly.
Your mind goes blank anyway, you're in such shock. So we were sat in the back of a police car, and they very quickly started to ask us who her friends were and what her plans were for that day. And I just remember my mind going blank. I couldn't remember her friends' names. I couldn't remember their surnames. The information I was given to the police was so sketchy. I can't believe they managed to piece things together, really.
When you hear about the nature of the injuries, the amount of blood, and you understand the family circumstances, Ellie came from a very loving family, very popular at school, no indications to suggest that she would she would take her own life. And then you automatically start hypothesising that obviously this is likely to be a homicide until such time that you can disprove either way.
Unaware of the police's suspicions, Ellie's distraught parents believed their daughter's tragic death was a mishap.
Matt was in so much shock he couldn't speak. We were going through it in our heads. I was convinced she just had an accident and she must have climbed up on something for some reason to get maybe something out of a cupboard and had fallen off a chair and hit her head. I kept saying she must have had an accident. Maybe she put the knife in the toaster and electrocuted herself and fell backwards. All these things were going through our head. And then at one point Matt said, "No, Carol, no, there was just too much blood. Too much blood." And then you just can't imagine what had happened at all.
While Ellie's parents were struggling to come to terms with her death, the police were starting to become suspicious.
It was quite evident early on that a neighbour had seen someone call at the address earlier in the day. And whilst they didn't see their face, we had a description that they were male, they were slim-build.
As police started the hunt for the mystery visitor, Ellie's parents had been taken to the local police station.
The police that were looking after us came in and said, "We have an update. We're investigating a murder inquiry." And at that point, I felt like I'd been thrown against a wall and thought, a murder inquiry? Ellie was just loved by so many people. She didn't have any enemies. Who on earth would murder our dear Ellie? Who would do that?
It's shocking enough to come to terms with the loss of somebody you love. But then that is made far more powerfully painful when you realise it's a murder. What happens then to the family and the friends? Suspicion. Everything that you thought was safe is no longer true. The way you think about yourself and the world is shattered. And psychologically, that is traumatic.
It's impossible to understand how all of a sudden your home can become a crime scene. And not only that, but while you're struggling to deal with what's happening, you're having to take calls you never in a million years thought you'd have to take.
I get a call from our son Ben, who lives in Oxford, and he had seen on Facebook that somebody had posted, "There's something going on, police cars everywhere," and a picture of the end of our drive. And he said, "Mum, what's going on? What's going on?" And I had to tell him that Ellie had a terrible accident and she died. It was awful. And it was just a whirlwind. I look back now and it was just terrible. Terrible.
My mum's phone was ringing and the caller ID said that it was Carol. And my mum went out into the hall to pick up her phone. And I could tell quite quickly from what I could overhear that something was really wrong. I can just remember my mum saying, "I'm so sorry, Carol, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say, but I'll go and tell Mum and Dad." And then my mum got off the phone and just said, "Matt's come home from work and he's found Ellie dead." Sorry. Just grab a drink. Thank you.
At first, not that much was put out by the police, but once it was revealed that a 17-year-old girl had been killed in her own home, I think everybody that any of myself and my colleagues spoke to, there was this feeling of shock. What is going on? This can't be happening in our road, in our town.
When someone is killed within their home, it's very likely that they are known to the offender. Thomas Griffiths, we know, had been in a relationship with Ellie.
DS Jim Taylor and his team immediately contacted Ellie's friends to get as much information on Tom and Ellie as possible.
I was at my boyfriend's house and I'd got a call from my dad to say, "Oh, Ellie, you need to come home now. We've got police officers at the house." And straight away I started to panic and I thought, "Oh God, what have I done?" And I finally got home. They took me into my living room and they just started asking me questions about Ellie. And that day I was supposed to be picking her up to take her into school, but she had messaged me in the morning to say, "Don't worry about picking me up." So I was just sort of giving them the answers, but not really panicking, just more nervous of being questioned by the police. It wasn't until they said that, Ellie had died that I completely broke down and didn't know what to do with myself.
The detective's questioning soon turned from Ellie to Tom.
I was screenshotting messages that Tom had sent. And then I looked on Snap Maps to see where he was. Just coincidentally, I just thought, I'll just have a look on Snap Maps. And it so happened to be that he was still in the area. I thought, oh gosh, Tom's gone over to convince her that they should be together. And Ellie, being Ellie, has been very blunt with him and gone, look, Tom, it's not happening. We're not going to get back together. You need to get over it.
We see our friendship groups as our circle of trust. We've shared stuff, we are vulnerable with each other. All that sort of stuff is what bonds groups of friends together, particularly teenagers. To then pierce that with, well, there might be an enemy within, is very destabilising.
For the police, Ellie's ex-boyfriend, Tom Griffiths, wasn't just a person of interest. He was the person of interest.
We knew that we had to find him very quickly and get an account of his movements for that day. When officers eventually caught up with him, he was displaying some injuries to his neck, which looked fresh. His demeanour at the time, I think they were concerned about the consistency in what he was saying. And there was some information from a neighbour whom they'd seen call at the address of the Goulds, and he matched the description of that person. And therefore, at the time, he was deemed a suspect and was arrested.
So Tom wasn't acting normally, but then he was a teenager who'd found out the ex-girlfriend he still loved was dead. It didn't necessarily mean he was guilty of murder.
There was an update to say a young man had been arrested. And it was at that point that Matt and I looked at each other and said, it's Griffiths, isn't it? It's Griffiths. And we looked at the police officer and said, it's the boyfriend, isn't it? It's the boyfriend. And he just looked at us and he said, I'm really sorry, but we can't confirm anything at this stage. But let's just say I think you've worked it out for yourself. And the shock, honestly, the shock, we just could not believe it. Just couldn't believe it.
Already reeling from the death of their 17-year-old daughter Ellie, Carol and Matthew Gould were at the police station when they were told that her ex-boyfriend had been arrested.
I remember saying to the family liaison guy, please don't tell me you're bringing him here. Please don't tell me you're bringing him here to Melksham where we are. And he went, no, they wouldn't do that. But they did. So we were sat in the family suite and that monster Griffiths was in the cell.
Still unaware Tom was in custody, Ellie's friends revealed to police that he'd messaged everyone on the day of the murder.
He sent us all pictures in a sort of a group chat. He sort of sent a picture of him and you can see sort of scratches on his neck. And it was him saying, you know, I've been self-harming, I've been having a really tough time. And obviously everyone was saying, Tom, look, you can always talk to us. You know, we're here for you. We're your friendship group. This is what we're for. If you ever feel like that, just let us know.
Soon, though, news of the arrest got out.
As the days went on and it was revealed that another teenager, 17-year-old boy, had been arrested in connection, the sense of disbelief just grew, really.
See, I really struggle with it because I knew Tom since primary school. So my relationship with him, from my point of view, was really good. I really liked him as a friend. So for me, I was really struggling to believe that he did it and that if he did do it, he didn't mean to do it, it was an accident.
Now a murder suspect, Tom Griffiths was interviewed at Melksham Police Station.
He immediately asked, he's been at home studying all day, is his girlfriend okay? And that was one of the first things he'd said. And he hadn't heard from her. He said that in the morning he was going to school and his mum took him to school. He says that he wasn't feeling very well, so he didn't want to go to school, and once she dropped him off, he got the bus home. He didn't realise that his mum came back a little bit earlier as well, so she came home around about 10:45. The first concern that we had at the time was that Tom said that when his mum came home, she wasn't aware that he was at home because he hid in the wardrobe away from her.
Just 2 days after Ellie's horrific death, Carol and husband Matthew had to do something no parent can ever imagine having to do: identify their daughter's body.
On the Sunday, we were picked up and driven to the mortuary to see Ellie. They told us that they had to put plasters over her neck so that we couldn't see the stab wounds, all 13 of them. But she looked at peace. We put a rose on her. Rose is her middle name. And it was heartbreaking. As I've said before, no mother should ever hold the cold hand of their murdered child. That is wrong. That is disgusting. That is horrific. And yeah, it was awful.
As more horrific details about Ellie's death emerged, the ripples of shock spread beyond the family.
As a reporter, I'm working in a newsroom where a lot of the stories we do are happy community stories. When you get a big story like this, which is very much affecting the community, it does have that sort of sobering effect. You do become hardened a little bit to hearing about things, but this kind of affected all of us.
In the police cell, Tom was still insisting he knew nothing about Ellie's death and was explaining his movements on the day she died.
The next part of his account is that he speaks to his neighbours and that he's upset and stressed out about exams and a family member who's suffering from ill health, and that he was self-harming. And his neighbours obviously remember seeing some scratch marks down his neck because they commented on it.
A clearly upset Tom then asked the neighbour for a lift back to school.
He again became very upset and asked to speak to the school nurse and explained that he was self-harming. They then called his mother. She came to pick him up from school and took him back home.
A few days later, Jim, the detective, came to see us. We were at my parents' house in Berkshire by then, and they had to tell us how Ellie died. And I remember saying to Jim, would it have been quick? Would it have been quick? And he did look in my eyes and he said, we think she was unconscious after you strangled her because she had no puncture wounds to her hands, which you would naturally use to defend yourself if somebody was coming at you with a knife.
The evidence police were gathering was beginning to cast doubt on Thomas Griffiths' version of events, so detectives began to intensify their questioning, as well as analyse his digital footprint.
So when we downloaded Thomas's smartphone, we could see that around about 10:50, his smartphone disconnected from the family router and didn't reconnect for some 1 hour later. His location services were activated on his phone, and we were able to identify that at 10:53 he arrived at Eleanor's house. And from that information, we knew that he left at 11:51. So he'd spent almost exactly an hour at the premises.
The police didn't have enough to charge Griffiths in connection with Ellie's death. But more evidence showing he wasn't where he said he was coming to light.
We were also fortunate enough to get some CCTV from a bus company who had dash cam footage of a silver Ford Fiesta. We were able to see clearly that it was Thomas Griffiths' car. So there was a digital footprint of his movements. It showed that automatically his account was wrong. We ascertained that whilst he returned home and after about an hour, there was an 18-minute gap where he dropped off the router again at home and then logged back on. It would indicate a short exit from the premises. Within an exactly 9-minute walk away from his home address, the search teams located a black bin liner which contained blood-stained tea cloths, blood-stained napkins and towels.
The evidence was sent for forensic examination. But it was still far from clear what Tom's motive for harming Ellie could have been.
I wonder whether there was a sense of loss of face in the friendship groups with his family, her family, the community, and all that kind of image would have been shattered by being dumped in his mind. And at this point, a 17-year-old, this might be his everything. This is how I see myself. And I need to restore my pride, my sense of self, how hurt I feel. I don't like how you've made me feel, and you are going to pay for it.
So I think it was early hours of Monday morning, when we received the news from the laboratory that the blood on the trainers at Thomas's home address was Eleanor's. And really that was the evidential breakthrough that we had and we needed, because at no stage during his questioning did he ever say that he'd come into contact with Eleanor when she'd been bleeding, and there's absolutely no way that those shoes will have her blood on them because he only ever wore them for work.
Armed with damning forensic evidence, police charged 17-year-old Thomas Griffiths with Ellie Gould's murder. Although the family knew the appalling details of how Ellie had been killed, it wasn't public knowledge.
So you'd hear people say, oh, it must have been an accident, it must have been push and a shove and a hit of the head. And you just wanted to scream and shout and say, no, it wasn't, no, it wasn't. But we couldn't say anything. And there was no way we were going to let anything leak and jeopardise anything to do with the trial.
How can someone that you spend every day with betray you in that way and destroy so many lives, really? It's just, yeah, I'm full of disbelief still.
Three days after Ellie Gould had been found stabbed to death in a frenzied attack, her ex-boyfriend Tom Griffiths was charged with her murder. But it was inexplicable why a seemingly normal 17-year-old boy would do this.
And at that stage, we're preparing for a not guilty trial. So all the evidence that we have to assume that he's not going to plead guilty. He's going to continue with his course of action that he's not involved. And the onus is on the prosecution to prove the case.
Police worked hard to ensure the evidence proving Griffiths had killed Ellie was watertight and showed that he had planned it.
There just wasn't enough evidence to suggest that by parking his car in the road, he meant to kill Ellie. By putting his hood up, he meant to kill Ellie. It just wasn't enough. The prosecutor, the Crown Prosecution Service, the investigation team felt that whilst it was a good indicator, there just wasn't enough to get us to that point, sadly. But based on the crime scene examination, we strongly suspect that Thomas had stabbed Ellie. He'd then cleaned his shoes at the scene. And the likelihood was that he'd cleaned the knife and then wiped it on the apron in efforts, I suspect, to remove his DNA.
Throughout the investigation, the lengths Griffiths had gone to trying to cover his tracks had disturbed police. But there was one act that stood out.
Around about 11:45, a message was sent from Eleanor's phone to her friend, who was due to pick her up in a little while to take her to school. And we strongly suspect that Tom sent that message.
I don't believe he knew the code. We believe when Ellie was dead, he used her fingerprint to open up her phone to send a message to Ellie Welling to stop her coming here. But the most chilling thing he did was he put the knife in Ellie's hand and raised her arm to her neck and reinserted the knife into a wound in her neck to try and make it look like she had killed herself. That is one hell of a monster. That is an evil psychopath. And then he calmly walked out of here as if nothing had happened and continued to try and pervert the course of justice and hide the evidence.
On the 29th of May, nearly 4 weeks after her murder, the town of Caen came to a standstill for Ellie's funeral.
It wasn't until I think we were walking into the church behind the coffin that was a massive point, I think, where everything kind of hit me. And it was just, I think, the most difficult kind of day out of everything that we've been through.
It was surreal. The numbness gets you through. Many people have said to me it's the most saddest thing they've ever been to. There was silence in the church, apart from hearing people cry, just sobbing. It was just heartbreaking.
The Goulds still didn't know why Ellie had been killed. In August, during his hearing, Griffiths pleaded guilty to Ellie's murder. But he gave a new version of events of the day she died.
In his defence case statement, Thomas said that he drove the car to Ellie's house and they were there with the intention of studying, and they studied for a while. They then started to argue about family members, and it's at that point Tom says that he suffered from a degree of amnesia. He remembers strangling Ellie, and then he loses his memory, and he came to with Ellie having been stabbed. It seemed to me a minor argument, a minor disagreement that escalated exceptionally quickly, and I find that really hard to believe.
Blind rage can lead you to forget. The logical brain gets pushed out of the way while the adrenaline has to have a way out, which is usually in violence. However, the fact that after that he put her hand on the knife, he used her fingerprint to send messages, is something quite different. This is not amnesia, this is cold, calculated planning.
Whether his story was believable or not, Thomas Griffiths pleaded guilty to Ellie's murder, meaning the case would not go to trial. It wasn't until sentencing in November 2019 at Bristol Crown Court that Carol finally came face to face with the boy who had gone from boyfriend to killer.
He's a coward. He just looked down. He wouldn't look up at any of us. I stared at him the whole time. I wanted him to see my face. I also stared at his parents. His dad just looked upwards. He wouldn't look at anybody. And his mum just looked down.
He was sentenced on the basis that he was a child, even though he was within weeks away of being an adult. The offence committed, he was a child. And He had no previous convictions, and he was sentenced to life, of course, mandatory, but with a tariff of 12.5 years.
Ellie's family and friends were devastated.
The judge read out how long he would get, and there was just this feeling of disbelief, like how could such a disgusting crime get such a lenient sentence? We thought, what more must he have done to our poor Ellie to get more? And I just remember, like, one of the most painful memories that I have is exiting out of the public gallery and hearing the noise that Carol made. It was just gut-wrenching, really. It was just this wail of pain that everybody was feeling, but no one could put across how painful it is to hear that that is all her life was worth. It wasn't even how long she was on this earth for.
He got the minimum sentence for basically apologising for what he had done, which he didn't even read out his own apology. He got his lawyer to read it out, which is just pathetic, you know. Anyone can sit down and write "I'm sorry" on a bit of paper and not actually feel sorry for what they've done.
As a police officer, I felt the sentence was appropriate and within the sentencing guidelines. As a father, I was devastated for the family.
Carol immediately tried to appeal the sentence, but despite a wave of support, the appeal was turned down.
The only positive thing our barrister said about it all, and I cling on to this, was that when he comes up for parole, they will look back at the crime, and he went from 0 to 100 in terms of violence, for no reason, which makes him such a dangerous individual.
Ellie's friends and family rallied round to ensure that out of the darkness of the murder, they could continue to shine a light on Ellie.
Our long-term goal is to have self-defence lessons become a mandatory part of the national curriculum. We want pupils to have this skill so they can grow up and hopefully never use it, but should they have to, they can protect themselves.
There we go, see? Oh, God, look how cute she is.
We were given these books of condolences. One was left at the school and one was left at the church. A lot of the school pupils have written some lovely things in here, and we realise now what Ellie meant to so many different people. There was one that particularly stood out to me, and I don't know this person, and they've just signed their name with crosses. I didn't know you that well, but I remember you always smiling to everyone you passed in the hallways, me included. Your smile made my day. Ellie, I wish I could tell you in person how much I appreciate your smile. And I just thought, yeah, that was Ellie.